Most people think a new year is about doing more effort, more goals, more noise. But the people who see the farthest often begin by doing less and seeing more. They pause, they look back, and they ask a quieter question. What have I been missing all this time? Tonight I want to sit with you for a while. Not to excite you, not to impress you, just to think together. Because over the course of 6 decades, one careful observer of human behavior and money noticed something simple, almost unremarkable on the surface. The biggest financial outcomes didn't come from brilliance alone. They came from patterns of thought, patterns of behavior, patterns of patience. And when a new year arrives, it offers something rare, a natural pause, a moment where we can step out of motion, take a breath, and gently reset how we see the game we're playing. So let's slow down. There's nowhere to rush to. The first pattern he noticed, and perhaps the most misunderstood, is this quiet truth. People respond to incentives more than they respond to advice, logic, or even morality. You can see this everywhere once you stop trying to unsee it in businesses, in families, in governments, in yourself. People don't do what they say they value, they do what they are rewarded for. And the tricky part is that most incentives are invisible. They hide behind titles, behind systems, behind social approval. Sometimes they even hide behind our own self-image. At the start of a new year, many people promise themselves discipline, better spending habits, smarter investing, more restraint. But restraint collapses when incentives quietly push the other way. If your environment rewards consumption, speed, and comparison, then willpower alone won't save you. You will drift back to old patterns, not because you are weak, but because the system is stronger than intention. So the reset doesn't begin with motivation, it begins with alignment. Why? Slowly ask yourself, what am I being rewarded for right now? What behaviors feel easy even when they're unhelpful? And what good behaviors feel strangely difficult? This isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. When incentives are aligned, discipline feels natural. When they aren't, discipline feels like swimming upstream. The second pattern takes even longer to accept because it asks for something modern life rarely encourages: patience, not passive waiting, but active, steady patience. Over long periods of time, small advantages don't stay small. They compound quietly, relentlessly. Most people intellectually understand this, but emotionally reject it. They want results they can feel this month, this quarter, this year. But the most meaningful financial progress often feels boring while it's happening. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't trend. It doesn't make you feel clever at dinner parties. It just grows, slowly. Like a tree you barely notice until one day it casts shade. A new year tempts us to make dramatic changes, bold moves, fresh starts that feel heroic. But long-term success is rarely heroic. It's repetitive, it's consistent, it's slightly dull, and yet over decades, it becomes extraordinary. This pattern teaches a strange kind of humility. You stop asking, what big thing can I do right now? And you start asking, what small thing can I continue doing without interruption? That question changes everything. The third pattern is one of the hardest for intelligent people to accept. It is the idea that knowing your limits is more powerful than expanding your reach. There is a deep cultural belief that smart people should have opinions on everything: markets, technology, politics, the future. But wisdom doesn't spread itself thin, it concentrates. The observer noticed that the most consistent success came from people who stayed within a small circle of understanding and then treated that circle with deep respect. They didn't try to be clever everywhere. They tried to avoid being foolish anywhere. At the start of a new year, there's often pressure to explore new opportunities, new trends, new strategies, and curiosity is healthy. But confusion is expensive. If you can't explain something simply to yourself, calmly, without excitement or fear, it probably doesn't belong in your financial life. This pattern invites a gentle kind of self-honesty, not what could I learn, but what do I truly understand? And just as important, what do I not need to have an opinion about? There is great peace in saying, that's outside my understanding and I'm comfortable with that. The fourth pattern sounds almost backwards at first. Instead of trying to be smart, try to avoid being stupid. This is not cynicism, it's clarity. Many financial disasters don't come from lack of intelligence. They come from avoidable mistakes repeated too often, overconfidence, excessive leverage, emotional decision-making, ignoring risk because recent outcomes felt go. OD. So rather than asking, how can I win big? The wiser question becomes, how could I lose badly? And then you quietly step away from those edges. You don't need to cross every bridge just because it's there. You don't need to test every boundary to know it's dangerous. A new year is a perfect time for this kind of inversion, not adding complexity, removing fragility. What habits increase risk without increasing meaning? What behaviors feel exciting but leave you exposed? What decisions they are, driven more by fear of missing out than by understanding. Avoiding stupidity doesn't feel ambitious, but over a lifetime it is astonishingly effective. The fifth pattern may be the most human of all. Temperament matters more than intellect. This is uncomfortable because we like to believe that knowledge alone is enough, that if we read enough, study enough, analyze enough, we'll make the RI choices, but under pressure, analysis disappears. What remains is temperament, how you behave when prices fall, when uncertainty rises, when others panic or boast. Financial success over decades is less about making brilliant decisions and more about not abandoning good ones. That requires emotional steadiness, the ability to sit with discomfort without reacting, to let time do the heavy. Lifting, the new year often stirs emotion, hope, regret, urgency, and emotion is not the enemy. Unexamined emotion is part of the reset, is not planning harder, but softening slightly, creating space between feeling and action, a pause, a breath, because in that pause, wisdom has room to speak. When you step back and look at these 5 patterns together, something gentle emerges. They are not tricks. They are not strategies to beat others. They are ways of relating to reality more honestly. Align incentives. Respect compounding. Stay within understanding. Avoid obvious mistakes. Guard your temperament. None of these are loud. None of them promise fast transformation. But together they create a life that feels steadier, clearer, and quietly more free. A new year doesn't reinvention. It invites realignment. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to see a little more clearly than you did before. And clarity, unlike motivation, tends to last. So as the days unfold and routines return and the calendar pages begin to blur together again, remember this moment of stillness, not as a resolution, not as a rule, just as a gentle orientation, a way of standing in the world that makes fewer enemies of time, uncertainty, and yourself. And if nothing else settles tonight, let this one idea rest with you. Progress doesn't rush. It accumulates, and often the most meaningful resets are the ones so quiet, only you ever notice they happen. People don't act based on advice or intentions alone. They act based on what they are rewarded for. Is one of the most uncomfortable truths about human behavior, because it quietly exposes how little control we often have over our own actions. We like to believe that good intentions are enough, that if we understand what is right, we will naturally do it. But real life doesn't work that way. Understanding and action live in 2 very different worlds. Every day, people give themselves advice. Spend less. Save more. Be patient. Think long term. And yet, despite knowing all this, the same patterns repeat. The reason is simple, though not easy to accept. The environment is rewarding the opposite behavior. Quick spending is rewarded with comfort and pleasure. Risky decisions are rewarded with excitement and social approval. Constant activity is rewarded with praise, while quiet patience is often ignored. Over time, the brain learns not from words, but from rewards. When incentives are misaligned, discipline becomes exhausting. You start each day with good intentions and end it wondering where they went. Motivation fades not because you are lazy or weak, but because you are fighting a system that is quietly pushing you in another direction. It is like trying to walk upstream while pretending the current doesn't exist. Eventually, even the strongest will grow tired. This is why advice alone rarely changes behavior. You can listen to the best ideas in the world, read the smartest books, and still remain stuck. If your surroundings reward short-term thinking, emotional reactions, and constant stimulation, those behaviors will win again and again. Not because they are better, but because they are reinforced. Real change begins when incentives change, when saving feels rewarding, not restrictive, when patience is supported, not punished, when long-term thinking is built into your systems, not left to willpower. This might mean automating good decisions so they happen without effort. It might mean removing temptations rather than trying to resist them. Or it might mean changing the people, habits, and signals that quietly influence you every day. The most powerful realization is this: you don't need more self-control as much as you need better structure. When incentives are aligned, discipline feels lighter. You don't constantly argue with yourself. Good behavior stops feeling heroic and starts feeling normal. You're no longer relying on motivation, which comes and goes. You're relying on a system that gently guides you in the right direction, even on difficult days. In the end, this idea isn't cynical. It's compassionate. It reminds us to stop blaming ourselves for failing inside broken systems. Instead, we learn to design environments where doing the right thing is also the easiest thing. And when that happens, progress stops being a struggle and becoming a natural outcome of how life is set up around us. Small, consistent actions done over a long period create extraordinary results. This idea sounds simple, almost too simple to matter, and that is exactly why most people ignore it. We are naturally drawn to big moments, dramatic changes, and visible breakthroughs. We want progress we can feel immediately. We want proof that our effort is working. But real progress rarely announces itself. It moves quietly, often unnoticed, while our attention is pulled elsewhere. Most meaningful growth happens in silence. A small habit repeated every day does not feel powerful in the moment. It feels ordinary. Sometimes it even feels pointless, saving a little money, learning a little more, choosing patience instead of reaction. None of these actions create excitement. There is no applause, no instant reward. And because nothing dramatic seems to happen, many people stop. They assume that if progress were real, it would feel faster. But time changes the meaning of small actions. What feels insignificant today becomes important tomorrow. What seems boring in the beginning becomes impressive in hindsight. This is how compounding works, not just in money, but in skills, relationships, health, and thinking. Each small step builds on the last, quietly increasing its impact. The power is not in the action itself, but in its repetition over time. The problem is that our minds are not designed to appreciate slow rewards. We are wired to respond to immediate feedback. When effort does not produce quick results, doubt enters. We start questioning the path. We compare ourselves to others who seem to be moving faster, and slowly, without realizing it, we abandon the very behaviors that would have worked if we had stayed with them long enough. Real progress often feels boring because it lacks drama. There is no sudden turning point. There is no single moment you can point to and say, that's when everything changed. Instead, GE happens gradually. One day you look back and realize that something is different. Your finances are steadier. Your thinking is calmer. Your reactions are less emotional. The shift happened so slowly that you didn't notice it while it was happening. Consistency is not about intensity. It is about reliability. You don't need extreme effort. You need effort you can sustain. Small actions are powerful precisely because they are manageable. They don't demand motivation every day. They fit into real life. And because they are easier to maintain, they have time to work their magic. In a world obsessed with speed, Choosing patience is a quiet act. Wisdom, it means trusting a process you cannot see clearly yet. It means valuing direction over pace. And it means understanding that the most reliable path forward is often the least exciting one. Over time, that quiet path leads somewhere meaningful, without noise, without urgency, and without burning you out along the way. You don't need to have an opinion on everything. This idea sounds too gentle for a world that constantly demands certainty. Today, silence is often mistaken for ignorance, and hesitation is seen as weakness. We are encouraged to react quickly, speak confidently, and take positions on subjects we barely understand. But wisdom often moves in the opposite direction. It knows when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain quiet. Staying within what you truly understand is not limitation, it is protection. When you operate inside your circle of understanding, decisions feel clearer and calmer. You are not guessing, you are not pretending. You are acting from knowledge that has been tested by experience, not borrowed from headlines or opinions of others. Outside that circle, confusion begins. And confusion is costly, not only financially, but emotionally. Many mistakes happen not because people lack intelligence, but because they overestimate their understanding. They feel pressure to participate, to keep up, to appear informed. So they form opinions quickly, often based on incomplete information. Once an opinion is formed, the ego gets involved. It becomes harder to step back, harder to admit uncertainty. And slowly, decisions stop being gooey, dead by truth, and start being guided by the need to be right. There's also a quiet stress that comes from caring about too many things. When you have opinions on everything, you carry the weight of everything. Markets, trends, news, predictions, all demanding your attention, all asking for emotional energy. This constant mental engagement creates anxiety. It keeps the mind busy, restless, and reactive. And most of the time, none of it improves your life in any meaningful way. Choosing to stay within what you understand is an act of mental discipline. It means accepting that the world is vast, complex, and far beyond what one person can fully grasp. And instead of fighting that reality, you work with it. You narrow your focus. You go deeper rather than wider. You allow yourself to say, I don't know enough about this to have a strong opinion, and you feel no shame in that. This approach doesn't make life smaller, it makes it more stable. When you limit your opinions, your decisions improve. When your decisions improve, stress decreases. You stop reacting to every piece of information. You stop chasing every new idea. You become less vulnerable to hype, fear, and social pressure. Over time, this creates a quiet confidence, not the loud confidence of always having an answer, but the steady confidence of knowing where you stand and where you don't. You learn that it is perfectly acceptable to watch from the sidelines, to observe without participating, to wait without rushing to judgment. In the end, clarity comes not from knowing more about everything, but from knowing enough about what truly matters to you. And when you respect the boundaries of your understanding, you protect your peace, your resources, and your ability to make decisions that actually serve you well.